I have not stopped the rename option. You can find out the rename option by yourself, and it should be working because others have renamed their name. Can anyone please volunteer? Give some shortcut so that he'll find out the ways to rename. Okay, I have checked it again to rename yourself. Okay. So what we are doing in previous class, can anyone please write in chat box in 3 or 4 words what we are doing? Can anyone write in your chat box what we are doing in previous class, CVP analysis? Okay, so for what purposes CVP analysis will help us? Is it worth to make a CVP analysis? Is it worth to spend time for it? I'm just trying to make sure that you know that what we are doing, we are not spending time for unknown reason. Okay, so Shadin has responded, Arman has responded. To determine the net profit, operating profit. Okay, good. Okay, let me begin the recording. Then we have learned that CBP has dynamic relationship. I mean the cost, volume, profit in broader sense, but we have seen that there are 5 components and they have a dynamic relationship. And if we change one variable out of these 5 variables, we will see that other things are getting changed. And what can we do? We can think of that what should be the starting point, or in which point I should hit or I should think of to get an expected outcome. Say if we have expected outcome that I should have higher net operating profit margin. So I have some constant, say my fixed cost is constant and my variable cost per unit is constant. So I have some flexibilities in terms of sales unit. So by changing the sales unit, how much net operating profit margin I can generate. So the relationship helps us that which variable I should work on to get the expected outcome. It can be in terms of profit, it can be break-even point, it can be like anything, if we have the changes in fixed cost, or if we have anything like changes in the variable cost per unit, or if we have anything like the increase in sales unit. Okay. So in the learning objective 3, today we like to see that how contribution margin ratio can be helpful to compute the changes in contribution margin and the changes in net operating income if we uh, think of that there has been a changes in sales volume, or we are expecting to change our sales volume. So how can contribution margin ratio can be helpful? Contribution margin ratio in terms of the term we have coined today, but things are related what we discussed earlier. So as long as you are familiar with the contribution margin ratio must be so familiar to you. So we have come to learn that contribution margin is the amount remaining after covering the variable expenses, and this amount is remaining to make up the fixed cost. Okay. So what can we do if we divide the contribution margin either in total or per unit by the sales but you see that we are not saying contribution margin, we are saying this as a contribution margin ratio. So you probably can recall that in our current case, we have the contribution margin of 200. If I try to remind you that our per unit sales price is 500 taka, $500, and sales unit is 500. No, sales unit was 400. Then variable cost per unit is $300 per unit, and fixed cost was about 80,000. Fixed cost was about 80,000. I would recheck if there is any wrong, or you can help me. Okay, so we see that our contribution margin is the difference between the sales price and the variable cost. So we see that in terms of total, our contribution margin is this amount, our sales unit multiplied by price 500 minus variable cost. This is the contribution margin per unit. So from this we get how much? 80,000. So this is our total contribution margin. So if we, what we are saying that if we divide the contribution margin dollar volume by the sales, or we express the contribution margin in terms of relative to sales, which is 200,000, 500 per unit selling price multiplied by 400 quantity. In that case, we are mentioning that this is the contribution margin ratio. Remember, this is not contribution margin. Contribution margin is this amount, the numerator amount. But when we are saying contribution margin ratio, the amount is this one. It is in terms of total, but in terms of, I mean, the per unit basis, we have per unit selling price is 500. And if we express the per unit contribution margin 200 related to the selling price per unit, we see that it is the same amount, I mean the 40%, you will see that it is 40%, and it is also 40%. Okay. So what we have done, we have learned that how contribution margin ratio can be calculated. Okay. Now the task is, what do we mean by the contribution margin ratio? From here, you can understand it. Let me change my pen color. You see on this part, for $1 of sales, I am getting 40 cents of contribution margin. Or for 1 taka of sales, I'm getting 0.4 taka or 40 paisa as contribution margin. Okay. If we want to express this number in terms of the incremental, I think is same. For 1 unit increase in sales, I will have 0.4 taka increase in contribution margin. Okay. So let's try to get the opposite side of the contribution margin. This is the calculation what we have done in terms of per unit. Here we have shown this to you in previous slide, that this should be 40%. Okay. Now what I like to highlight, the other side of the contribution margin, or what is the flip side of the contribution margin. So we are getting the contribution margin by subtracting variable cost. Okay. And divide this number by sales, we get the contribution margin ratio. And we know that this difference is contribution margin. So actually what we are doing this thing. But alternatively, if we do this thing, sales minus contribution margin over sales, what we are doing here, we are expressing variable cost relative to sales. Now, if the previous one, or the flip side what we discussed is contribution margin ratio, I mean this one, if it is contribution margin ratio, what we would say about this? It should be variable expense ratio. It should be variable expense ratio. So we had $300 per unit variable cost, and we had 400 unit selling price. So we had 120,000 total variable cost. If we express this number in terms of the sales of $200,000, we see that we have variable expense ratio of 60%. So you see, as I have mentioned, that these are flip side of each other. So if you have the contribution margin, say 40%, is it possible to get the variable expense ratio? If we have the contribution margin of 40%, it is possible to get the variable expense ratio in this way. Okay. So this is the sales. This one is the contribution margin ratio. Okay. Now, if we do just the opposite, we subtract the sales of $1 and we subtract the 0.6 variable expense ratio. Variable expense ratio, what we will get? We get the contribution margin ratio. So this is the simple thing what we have learned conceptually, but here we are just expressing the number in terms of some very plain equation, nothing difficult or nothing sophisticated here. Okay. So in this way, what we see that contribution margin ratio and variable expense ratio are interrelated. So I believe that nothing is too advanced here. It's just kind of expressing the same thing what we learned conceptually. Okay. Now, what we like to do, we like to apply the contribution margin ratio. That what is the use of contribution margin ratio? Does it serve any purpose, or does it help our time? Does it help to reduce our time consumption for getting our expected result, or for looking at what is happening? So yes, it has some purposes. We like to see that for what purposes contribution margin ratio can be helpful. Okay. So before looking at the way that how it can be helpful, let's assume a case, or assume some changes in from our base case, that in our base case we have 400 units of sales. Now in our new case, we see that our sales has increased from 400 units of bikes to 500 units of bikes. So what will be the response of contribution margin for the changes of sales unit from 400 to 500 units? So this is our new case, that what will happen if our sales unit increases by 500 units from the 400 units. Okay. Now you see that what will be our increase of sales volume, or increase of our sales for the changes in sales unit. Note that we have not changed our sales price. And also remember, this is a number one assumption of CBP analysis, that sales price will remain constant. Okay. So you see that what will be the changes of sales for the changes in the sales unit? We see that 100 units of bikes is expected to increase in the sales unit. So for 100 units of new sales, and at $500 per bike price, we get how much new sales? It should be $50,000. Now, it is our sales value. Okay. Now we have the contribution margin ratio of 40%. From where we are getting the contribution margin ratio? From the previous calculation, we have learned that our contribution margin ratio is 40%. As long as our fixed, our sales price and our variable cost per unit remain constant. Okay. So if we multiply our incremental sales 50,000 by the contribution margin, my pen is disturbing. Yeah, we are here. Okay, let me write here 50,000 is our incremental sales. If we multiply this by our new our contribution margin ratio, not contribution margin, 40%. In that case, how much will be the changes in net operating income? We will be able to get this number by doing this calculation. We see that our net operating profit margin and net operating income will go up by 20,000, as it is plus. You see that we have not talked about anything about the fixed expenses, because it has it is constant or it has not changed from the changed case. So that is the reason that we are getting that how much net operating of profit will go up or go down for the changes in the sales unit. Okay, so you see, instead of doing the contribution margin format income statement, we can simply do this shortcut calculation to get the response of net operating income for the changes in the sales value or for the changes in sales unit. Okay, so this is the way how it is useful. Now, if we do the contribution margin format income statement traditionally, we can verify that we are doing the right thing. Okay, so how this is the base case, don't forget this. And what is happening here, our sales unit has increased from 400 to 500 units. We see that for this one, we have this sales value 500 multiplied by 500. Then we are subtracting variable expenses, which is 500 multiplied by 300 per unit. And we get this contribution margin 100,000. And we see that our fixed expenses 80,000 as before, and we get this 20,000 net operating income. And we see it was our break-even point from this base case. We see that our net operating income has increased from nothing to 20,000. So this is the same thing what we have seen here. Now, the question to you, between this case, the base case of 400 units and the new case of 500 units, has there been any changes in the contribution margin ratio? Yes or no? I see responses are coming. What about other responses? No, again. Okay, so I see that you are responding it rightly. Yeah, you are responding it rightly, and Famit has expressed it clearly that as long as there has been no changes in the sales price per unit and the variable expenses per unit, there should not be any change in the contribution margin ratio. But you see, if you look at the contribution margin is changing. But the contribution margin here in this case is 40%, and in this case it is also 40%. Okay. Again, what we are seeing that a 50,000 increase in sales revenue is causing the increase of net operating income by 20,000. So we have learned that how the contribution margin ratio calculation can be helpful for or can be useful for us. Okay. Yeah. Next, we like to check your understanding by making a quiz. Coffee Clutch is an espresso stand in a downtown office building. The average selling price of a cup of coffee is $1.49, and the average variable expense per cup is 0.36. The average fixed expense per month is $1,300, an average of 2,100 cups are sold each month. What is the contribution margin ratio for the Coffee Clutch? Contribution margin ratio. Do not take your calculator. Let me help you. How can you approximate? So we need either the per unit selling price and per unit variable expense, or we need the total sales and total variable expenses. So as long as per unit selling price and variable expense are given, we do not need to go for taking the total sales or total variable expense. Okay, we see that price per unit is 1.49, and our variable expense is $0.36. We need to get this calculation. Do not use your calculator. You see that it is approximate of 1.5. Okay. Now you see that approximately, if we think of that 1.5, for 1.5, we have 50% is 0.75, 20%, sorry, 25%, 25% is 0.375. 50% of 1.5 is 0.75. 25% of 1.5 should be 0.375, as it is 50% of 0.75. Okay, so we have learned that 0.375 is 25% of 1.5. We see this number are very closer. So we know that this number is 0.25 or 25%. So contribution margin, okay, what we have done here, we have expressed the variable expense here. So if we get a ratio here, that should be the variable expense ratio. We can do the alternative thing by subtracting this 0.36 from the selling price of 1.5 or 1.49. But you see from here, you see that variable expense ratio is 0.25. So the contribution margin ratio should be somewhat the 0.75 plus or 0.75. Okay. You see why it should be greater than 0.75, because you see the numerator is a little bit lower, and we see that denominator is little bit lower from this 1.5, and the denominator is little bit lower from this. Okay, so you will see that it should be somewhat lower from 0.25, and alternatively the contribution margin should be somewhat 1 minus the variable expense ratio, which is closer to 0.75. You see that this number is 0.758. So this should be your answer. If you do the calculation without taking help from your calculator. Okay, so sometimes these calculations are useful and will also help you to increase your mental ability. Okay, so is it 0.758 from your calculation? I mean the contribution margin ratio. Is it 0.758 from your calculation? Yes, no, yes. Okay, so you have got it, that how can we get the contribution margin ratio. Remember, this one we have done for simplifying or for mental calculation, and this one is the variable expense ratio, which is the flip side of the contribution margin ratio. Okay. If you have to express the number on your script by doing some calculation, you need to express the number in this way. We know that how can we get the unit contribution margin. Okay. Now, what we like to see, that we like to see more applications of contribution ratio by taking another case, that if there has been increase in sales volume, we see that as long as fixed expenses remain constant, there should be no role of fixed expenses if we want to see what will be the incremental profit for the incremental sales. But sometimes you will see that fixed expenses will go up or go down for changes of sales unit from the reference range. So we need to know what is the total perspective of the profit considering the fixed expense variable in the scenario. Okay, So this is the total scenario, that how can we get the profit using the contribution margin ratio. Okay. So what we need to do, it is the same thing what we learned before, but we are expressing in a more formal way. We need to multiply the sales by the contribution margin, and we need to subtract the fixed expenses. So this is the way that how equation can be helpful. And this is one way of formalizing what we have learned. Okay. So if RBC, the cycle company, increased its sales volume to 500 bikes, what would be the management expectation for profit or net operating income to be? So you see that for the increasing sales volume from 400 to 500 bikes, we know that our sales will be equal to 500 unit multiplied by $500 per unit. So this should be our sales volume. And we know that our contribution margin ratio is 40%. So from here, we get the contribution margin. And if we subtract the fixed expenses, we get the total profit in this scenario. Total profit in this scenario. So if you do this calculation, you will see that the profit will go up. Profit in total is 20,000. Profit in total is 20,000. So in this way, what can you do? You can also calculate the total profit. In previous case, we have seen that it is possible to calculate the incremental profit. So we see the total profit in the 500 bike sales case, we will see the 20,000 total profit. I mean, the total profit here means the net operating profit. Okay, so this is the way that how contribution margin ratio can be helpful or can be useful. Now, we'll see several cases by changing the variables. It is a kind of sensitivity analysis. I do not know, have you heard about the term earlier, that you want to look at the sensitivity of one variable. Here, our one variable is net operating income. By changing the value of one particular variable in your calculation, say, if we change only variable cost per unit, our fixed cost remain constant, selling price remain constant, sales volume remain constant. It's a kind of sensitivity analysis. Again, if you keep the variable cost constant, there has been no changes, only you change the fixed cost and other things same, and you want to see that what will be the response of net operating income for the changes in fixed cost. This kind of analysis is a kind of sensitivity analysis. Okay. Now, if you consider the changes in total scenario, say you want to see that what will be the changes in net operating income for changes in variable cost, changes in fixed cost, changes in selling price, and there has been no change in sales volume. In that case, you see that you are changing one variable or you are changing a multiple variable to see the response of the net operating income. The latter case, what I just have mentioned. Multiple variables I have mentioned. So in that case, that will be known as scenario analysis. That will be known as scenario analysis. You have come to learn about the sensitivity analysis, scenario analysis, simulation analysis more in your capital investment decision course, where it is much useful. But here we are also applying the same thing, but here our focus is from the managerial accounting perspective. But the idea is similar that what we are doing. We are doing here first. What we will do first the sensitivity analysis, then we will do some scenario analysis. Okay. First of all, if there has been changes in fixed cost and there has been changes in sales volume, how many variables we are changing in our calculation? I see responses multiple, 2. So it should be a scenario analysis. It should not be a sensitivity analysis. Okay, it should be a scenario analysis because you are changing more than one variable. Okay. Can you recall that what we have mentioned in the slide before the previous slide to get the calculation or to get the usefulness of the contribution margin ratio? From this information, and I believe you have learned what is the base information, should there be any changes in the contribution margin ratio for these changes? Should there be any changes in the contribution margin ratio for the changes of sales unit and for the changes of fixed cost? No. Okay, in that case, our contribution margin ratio equation can be helpful for us. Okay, let's try to use this. Okay, profit is equal to contribution margin ratio multiplied by sales. Then I do not know why it is happening. It didn't happen earlier. Okay, so contribution margin is 0.4 or 40%. Multiplied by our total sales should be 540, and it should be multiplied by selling price. What is our selling price? 500. Now, can you please mention what should be the value if we multiply 540 units by 500 selling price per unit? $270,000. Yeah. Now, what is our fixed expense? I mean, in a previous case, 80,000. And now if the fixed expense go up by 10,000, what will be the new fixed expense or new total fixed expense? 90,000, because the advertising expense is fixed expense. And what should be our profit in this case? I see responses are coming, but what about the responses from other people? Other people, 18,000, okay. Okay. Good responses are coming, 18,000. There has been no differences in their answer. So I should write here 18,000. Can you recall that what was our profit in case of 500 units? Yeah, 20,000. In earlier case, it was 20,000. So you see that for these changes, you see this is a good thing. I mean, increase of unit sales from 500 to 540. This is a good thing, right? This one, for the increase of sales unit from 500 to 540, this is a good thing. But you see, our monthly advertising budget is going up by 10,000. We cannot see is it a good thing or a bad thing unless we see what will be the responses of profit in response to changes in the increase of monthly advertising budget. So you see the previous case, our profit was 20,000, but in this new case, new scenario, we see that our profit has gone down by 2,000 to 18,000 from 20,000. So you see that how the contribution margin ratio analysis is helpful, that it is helping us that what will be the changes in profit, or what will be the profit if we change the scenario of the sales unit by changing our sales unit, or by increasing our fixed expenses in terms of monthly advertising budget. Okay, let's see whether we have done the right thing by looking at the calculation from the conventional contribution format income statement. We see that we have done the right thing. Our profit should be 18,000, and this one is 2,000 lower from the previous 20,000 profit in case of 500 unit sales. We see that our profit is to be decreased by 2,000 for the increase in sales unit, and simultaneously increasing of advertising expenses of 10,000. You see why this 10,000 advertising expenses is incurred. Why it is necessary? We already have some advertising expenses, but why we are thinking of increasing our advertising expenses? What is our motivation? I'm not giving any additional information. I'm just to get additional sales of how many units? To get increase of sales. Yeah, that is good that you have you are with me and you are thinking of the total picture, not at only looking at the numbers. Okay, now we are thinking of another case. I mean, if we look at the incremental part, which we would say a shortcut solution. So we know that contribution margin remain constant of $200 per unit. Okay, we just have changed our sales unit from 500 to 540. So this one should be the changes or increase of contribution margin, as it is a positive number. If it were a decrease in sales, in that case, it would be decrease in contribution margin. So we see that our contribution margin is going up by 8,000 for the increase of sales from 500 to 540. At the same time, our fixed expense incremental part is 10,000, which is 10,000 positive. And if we see our changes in profit by subtracting the increase of advertising expenses from the contribution margin, we see that it is to be 2,000. So here you see that the same thing what we solved in previous slides, and this is a way that how can we make a incremental analysis. Now, the second scenario, what we are trying to do here, what is the profit impact if RBC can use higher quality raw materials, thus increasing variable cost per unit by $10 to generate an increase in unit sales from 500 to 580. Okay. Higher quality raw materials. If it is your purpose, when you are thinking of higher quality of raw material, you should be prepared to incur more cost or incur less cost. Variable cost. If you think of higher quality material, more cost, and it should be kind of variable cost because the raw materials can be directly the cost of raw materials can be directly attributed to the product we are thinking of. Okay. So what is our purpose for increasing the higher quality raw materials? It is not our purpose to get the increasing variable cost or increased variable cost. Our holistic purpose is that we have realized that if we do this, our sales will go up from 500 to 580 units. This is our holistic purpose. Now, how many variables are changing in this scenario? One is variable cost per unit, and another one is sales unit is going up, right? So it's another sensitivity analysis or scenario analysis. Yeah, good. Scenario analysis. So what can we do? We can use our learning in this way. Profit. We like to see the impact on profit. We know the contribution margin ratio is now 40%, or it has changed. What is our contribution margin now? 500 per unit price minus 310 variable expense. This is our contribution margin per unit. And if we divide this by per unit selling price 500, we see that it should be, yeah, it has changed, but how much it is? The new contribution margin, 38. Yeah, good. It was initially a 40%. Now you see the contribution margin has changed. It should be 0.38. Now, if we multiply this by the total sales value, which is the 580 into 500, in that case, it should be 290,000. Yeah, 290,000. Okay. So we are getting the contribution margin amount from here, and we should subtract the fixed expense, right? Has there been any changes in fixed expense? There has been no changes in fixed expense, and note that what we are doing here, we are doing the total analysis, not the incremental analysis. Okay. So in that case, you need to write the fixed expenses in total. Okay. So what should be the amount here? The profit in comparison to 500 units. I mean, okay, 30,200. Yeah, 30,200. Can you recall that what was our profit in case of 500 units having the contribution margin of 40%. Okay, we see that in our new case, our net operating profit is 30,200. And if we consider our base case, and now 500 units, not the 400 units, we would see that it was 20,000. So for the increase of sales by 40,000, how 40,000 increase in sales? You see our new sales is 290,000. Our previous sales was 250,000. So there has been increase of $40,000 sales volume, sales. Okay. So what is our contribution? Our contribution is 40,000. I mean, in terms of net operating income, we are not getting the same amount of increase of 40,000. We have seen that 40,000 increased in the sales value from 250,000 to 290,000. But we are not seeing that net operating profit is going up to 60,000 by 40, change of 40,000. We see only half of it, 30,200. We see there has been no changes in fixed expense. Okay, but what is happening? Which is eating up our profit? Which amount is eating up our profit? There has been no changes in fixed expense. You see, there has been changes in variable expense. There has been changes in variable expense. So the variable expense is increased variable expense is eating up our cost. And we have remaining 30,200 as profit as we have calculated in previous one. Yeah, this one. 30,200. Okay. So you see from the previous case of 500 units, we see that there has been changes in positive changes in net profit of 10,200 for the increase of sales by 40,000 units. Now, is it good to use the high quality raw materials from this analysis in terms of profit? Is it good idea compared to the previous case, previous scenario? So in this case, you can do this. Okay. So you know that high quality raw materials incur high cost, high variable cost, and high quality raw materials also gives the seller the bargain to increase the price. Okay. Now we are looking at the scenario, new scenario, by changing 3 variables at a time. Okay. You know that how many types of vegetable oils are available in our country? How many types of vegetable oils are available in our country? Or would you please write the name you know? Types of vegetable oils you use for regular cooking oil. Write the one which you know. Nowadays, there are several vegetable oils available. We have got the answer soybean. What about any other option we have for vegetable oil? Olive oil, sunflower, then? Yeah. Mustard oil. Yeah. Then any other? Any innovative?
innovative item? You have idea? I just want to see that. Yeah, rice bran oil. I'm looking for this answer. You're aware of what is happening in our, okay? Olive oil, palm oil, soybean oil, canola oil, corn oil, peanut oil. Okay, so I have got so many responses. This is good. And you know that all our oils all serve the purposes of cooking, but you see that they are priced differently because their variable costs are different. Their variable cost per unit, I mean the per liter is different because of the quality of the raw material. Okay, so it is a classic example that for increasing the quality of the raw materials, you have to increase the variable cost per unit. And if you do not have the option to increase the price per unit, in that case, you need to see that for changes in quality, from lower quality to higher quality, is it possible that you will have higher profit because you will be able to serve more sales by increasing your quality? Okay, you see people are now becoming more health conscious and they are reducing their consumption of conventional soybean oil, and they are trying to switch their choice from the soybean oil to other sunflower oil or rice bran oil or peanut oil or the mustard oil. These things and these new forms are coming in the market, and the existing companies which are producing the soybean oil, they are now packaging new products by selling soybean oil, by selling the sunflower or by selling the rice bran. Okay, so this is the way that how the contribution margin ratio will help us to determine whether we will launch a product. If we see that launching this product will be contributing factor to increase our net operating profit, in that case we will decide to float the new product, otherwise not. Okay, so you need to think of the demand, whether the demand is rising for the high quality material. In that case, it is a good option that switch to new higher quality. Okay, so that is happening, but these oils which you have mentioned are not so available 10 years ago. Okay, and the conventional soybean oil is not available in developed countries. Okay, you need to find out it from elsewhere because their shops do not sell the conventional soybean oil. They sell only sunflower, or they sell only kind of mustard oil, or they sell only olive oil, these things. Okay. Okay, let's think of the new case. What is the profit impact if the RBC cuts its selling price $20 per unit, increases its advertising budget by 15,000 per month, and increases sales from 500 to 650 units per month? We see that so many things have been happening here. So many things have been changing here, and we need to think of this together. Okay, first of all, what can we do? We can look at the total scenario by preparing a plain income statement, contribution formula income statement, because we see that our sales volume has changed from 500 to 650. So for 650, have we seen any changes in selling price? Yeah, we have seen in the changes in selling price, because the selling price has decreased by 20. So our existing selling price is 500, so it is now 20 less, the 480. So it should be 650 multiplied by 480. And there has been no changes in variable expense, so it is same as same, 195,000. And but we would see that there has been changes in contribution margin because there has been changes in selling price. And we have seen that our fixed expense is expected to go up by 15,000 because we are increasing our advertising budget by 15,000. Our previous advertising expense, our previous fixed expense was 80,000, so it should be now 95,000. So we would see that the new profit will be 22,000. So alternatively, what could we do? We could use the equation what we shown in the previous slide to get the 22,000 profit. And we see that for changes of these three variables, some changes might be positive, some changes might be negative. There is no clear answer that it is a positive thing or it is a negative thing. But we need to think of the scenario that what is happening and is it in expected direction. We see from our base case of 500 units, our profit is expected to go up by 2,000. So in that case, it is justifiable that if we allow the sales price go down by 20 per unit, it is a good thing. And if we increase the advertising budget by 15,000 for generating 150 units of more sales, okay? So we see by balancing the good thing and by balance with the bad thing, I mean the increasing of cost, we see that is still our net value is positive because our operating income has gone up by 2,000. Okay. Okay. Now we like to see that what is the profit impact if the RBC pays a 15 sales commission per bike sold instead of paying salesperson flat salaries that currently total 6,000 per month. You see that what is happening. Our salesperson's sales commission was flat, part of flat salary. That regardless of the number of bikes sold by the salesperson, we would pay 6,000 commission per month. But now we have changed our policy. We are paying $15 per bike as a sales commission to the salesperson. What is happening here? In terms of the cost behavior, we are changing the cost classification. The sales commission, which was fixed cost to us, are we changing it to any other cost in terms of cost behavior? Are we changing it to fixed cost converted to variable cost? Yeah, precisely this is happening here. Fixed cost is changing to variable cost. In that case, will there be any changes in the contribution margin? Yes, there will be changes in contribution margin. And fixed cost is expected to go down by 6,000. Okay, but you see that for in the same case, we are expecting that this will encourage the salesperson to increase more sales or to be satisfied with the same unit of sales. But what is our purpose for converting a fixed cost to variable cost? What is our motivation? What we are trying to do? More sales. Yeah. So they will be inclined to generate more sales because now their sales commission has become variable. It is no longer fixed. So as a salesperson, you do not like the variable sales commission, you like the fixed sales commission, right?